continue the academic nature of this part of the program. In years past, you remember that I've tried various things. I've tried singing. That hasn't worked out real well. I tried to do stand-up comedy when I was the host, and that didn't work out so well either. So I'm going to try to do something that's a little more sweet spot. This is just a creation moment. Think about the God of miracles. And sometimes in science, you're doing okay, you've got things going on here, and then what you really need is a miracle to happen so you can get past what is blocking you and then get on with your calculations and your discovery. And this is what we're going to talk about tonight. But I want to think first about watering your lawn. We have a large acreage. We've got like 3 acres. Most of it's in grass. And it's a little too big to water. But if I wanted to water the lawn at any point, I would use a water source. You can see that. And then in a linear fashion, we could hook up these sprinkler heads, thank you, and it would look like this. From a source, picking up each sprinkler head as we go along. There's 4, 8, 16 of these sprinkler heads. So this is a linear arrangement. Well, that has some difficulties with it. Oh, well, forget that. It has some difficulties because this source has a high pressure right at the beginning, but by the time you get down to the last sprinkler head, there's no water. There's no water pressure. That linear arrangement doesn't work so well. However, if you want to water not just a group of grass, if you wanted to water every single individual grass, what are these called? They're called blades. Thank you. So we want to get down to where the level of granularity where we can water every single blade of grass. And you use maybe a fractal pattern where you have the source in the center and every faucet head is the same distance from the source. 1, 2, 3, 4. Any direction you go, it's an H pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can make that continue as a repeating pattern. And the benefit of this is that there's constant pressure at all of the heads, and all get equal amounts of water. So here's an H fractal bracket of 10, but you can go to 20, you can go to 30 to get down to the point where you can water an individual blade of grass. Now, there's a problem with this, and the engineers in the audience probably have said, but if I had an incompressible liquid like water, and I had a pipe of smaller and smaller diameters, I'm going to run into a resistance to flow problem. As resistance to flow in this situation would increase as the pipe diameter decreases. So that's what's shown here in this graph. It's a problem that is just a basic physics problem. That as the pipe diameter gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, resistance to flow increases because there's more water touching a surface, a friction creating surface in these pipes. So that's a limiting problem. You would probably not be able to even do this if you wanted to water every blade of grass, because you'd have to have a pump that was too strong. It would break the pressure required would break the pipes. So now your circulatory system, in a sense, waters all of your cells. Every single one of your trillions of cells in your body right now are essentially being watered by blood. And you know this from school. Oxygenated blood leaves the heart and it goes through arteries and eventually comes through arterioles and then into tissue capillaries in the brain, in the lower legs, etc. And that comes back as deoxygenated blood to the right side of the heart, which goes back to the lungs where oxygen and gas are exchanged. This is a problem of the same magnitude of trying to water every blade of grass in your yard. How can you feed every single cell in your body? And yet this is what exactly happens. There are 32 levels going from the aorta down to the capillaries through arterioles, larger and smaller arterioles, finally down to little capillaries that only allow a single red blood cell to go through at a time. There's 32 levels to get down to the capillary, and there's 32 branching levels to come back up to the vena cava. And what's posted here, what's shown here, is the blood flow velocity goes way down as you come into capillaries. So the blood slows way down, but the total surface area goes way up. And that's what you need for good gas exchange. You need perfect conditions in every cell of the body to have a very slow flow of blood cells, but a very large area of red blood cells. And that is exactly what we have in each of our bodies. But what about this engineering problem? How can this work on a scale of a human being? If the vessel diameter goes down, shouldn't the resistance to flow increase as the diameter of the vessel decreases? Well, it should if you were using an incompressible liquid like water and smaller and smaller pipes. But here's where we need to insert the miracle. This is our creation moment miracle. Blood is not an incompressible liquid completely. It has 40% of blood are cells, red cells, white cells, and platelets. And that acts as what engineers would recognize as a non-Newtonian fluid. So the miraculous sense here is that blood flow actually decreases, the resistance to flow actually decreases as the vessel diameter gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So rather than this solid red that we see for just plain water, for blood, the curve is very, very different. As vessel diameter goes down, blood flow actually, the resistance to flow decreases. And that's really miraculous, because this is how every cell in our body is watered with blood and carbon dioxide and oxygen exchange. This is called the Magnus effect. This has to do with how the speed of blood flowing in an artery is about zero at the margins where there's a lot of friction, and higher and higher and higher levels of speed as you get towards the center of the vessel. And it imparts a spin, like you'd spin a dime or spin some flat object. It imparts a spin to the red blood cells in one direction, and in the other direction on the other side. And that spin stabilizes the red blood cells I can't see my pointer, in the center of the vessel, away from the friction-bearing surfaces at the periphery. That's called axial streaming. So this is called the Magnus effect. This is what really happens in you and I, and it's happening in us right now. And it looks like this. If you can see two large vessels, 1 and 2. These are not capillaries yet, because these red blood cells are lined up basically in the center of the vessel as they flow along towards the capillaries or from the capillaries. There's some other red blood cells that are up here as well that are in the center of the vessel because of this axial streaming. So you can actually see it occur. That lines the red blood cells up for insertion into capillaries, which are only a single cell width, and they allow for very slow movement of red blood cells through the capillary bed, and with a very, very large surface area for gas exchange, for oxygen to diffuse out, for carbon dioxide to diffuse in, to be taken towards the lungs. And so every breath is a miracle of God's design at work. And it happens in all of us all of the time as we're sitting here. A miracle has occurred and does occur in the design of our bodies in terms of just gas exchange. Problem, solution, circulation, we have a God of miracles. And that's our creation moment for this evening. Thank you.